What if I told you that a single metric can predict the fall of every superpower? Military spending exceeding a critical GDP threshold has consistently appeared in the collapse of empires: Spain, Rome, the Ottomans, the USSR, Britain. Let's uncover this pattern. What ties all these empires together? Beat. They spent themselves into oblivion on their militaries. The cost of maintaining vast armies, projecting power, and fighting wars often leads to financial strain. And when that strain exceeds a certain limit, the collapse becomes inevitable. This episode will explore how this phenomenon has played out across various empires, learning what each of them can teach us about the consequences of prioritizing military might over economic stability. The evidence is compelling. Military spending as a percentage of GDP has played a critical role in the rise and fall of empires. For instance, during the peak of the Roman Empire around 200 AD, military spending accounted for nearly 30% of its GDP. By the time of its fall in the West in 476 AD, it had become unsustainable. Spain, at its zenith in the late 16th century, spent over 40% of its GDP on military endeavors. The Ottoman Empire, too, saw military expenditures rise to alarming levels in the 17th century, contributing to its eventual decline. The Soviet Union, during the height of the Cold War in the 1980s, allocated about 15–20% of its GDP to military spending. This figure was deemed excessive and crippling to its economy, ultimately leading to its dissolution in 1991. Britain, once the world's foremost superpower, found itself in a similar predicament after World War II. Military spending soared to 50% of GDP at its peak, causing severe economic unraveling. Look at these numbers. Pause. When military spending crosses a certain line, somewhere around 30 to 40% of GDP, empires start to crack. The pattern is consistent. Spain did it. Rome did it. The Ottomans did it. The Soviet Union did it. Britain did it. Analyzing these examples provides a lens to understand why the cost of military strength can often outweigh the benefits, and why the empires that once dominated the globe found themselves in decline. In the course of this documentary, we will delve into each of these empires. First, we will explore Spain, examining the financial strains caused by relentless military campaigns in the New World and Europe. Next, we will dissect the Roman Empire's military expenditures during its decline, revealing how they stripped resources from essential domestic needs. Then we'll analyze the Ottoman Empire's military spending patterns, focusing on the costs of prolonged warfare and how they contributed to its downfall. Finally, we'll consider the Soviet Union and Britain, drawing parallels to modern nations grappling with similar dilemmas. We're going to trace this pattern through history, how military spending has been the warning sign before the fall, over and over again, or of decline, and what lessons can be gleaned for today's superpowers. Let's begin with Spain, a powerhouse in the 16th century, known for its vast colonial empire. The Spanish Empire was marked by its aggressive military campaigns as it sought to expand its territory and influence. After the year 1492, when Christopher Columbus sailed to the Americas, Spain saw a gold rush that fueled extravagant military spending. By the late 1500s, military spending had hit staggering levels, around 40% of national GDP going straight to the war machine. This spending wasn't just about maintaining a large army, it was about projecting power globally. Spain was embroiled in multiple conflicts, from the wars against the Moors to the battles against France and the ongoing conflicts with England. The Spanish Armada, famously defeated in 1588, exemplified the pitfalls of overextension. Spain poured resources into this fleet to safeguard its interests, yet the defeat marked a turning point, signaling the beginning of its decline. What's interesting here is not just the numbers, but the consequences of such military overreach. As military budgets soared, critical social services and infrastructure suffered. The wealth generated from the colonies did not translate into sustainable development. Instead, it fueled a cycle of dependency on military might. By the end of the 17th century, Spain was facing severe economic challenges. Inflation soared, partly due to the influx of gold and silver from its colonies, while the costs of maintaining a grand military presence drained the treasury. The result was catastrophic. By the 18th century, Spain was no longer the dominant empire it once was. Its military and economic capabilities had eroded. The Habsburgs, who had ruled Spain, were weakened, leading to political instability and a series of wars that further drained resources. The Spanish Empire did not collapse overnight, but the seeds of its decline were sown through military overspending. What can history teach us today? As we analyze Spain's decline, we can clearly see that unchecked military spending became a harbinger of doom. The lesson is stark. Prioritizing military over economic stability can lead to eventual collapse. Now, let's turn our attention to the Roman Empire. The Roman military was the backbone of its power. As early as 200 AD, military spending accounted for an alarming 30% of GDP. This empire stretched across Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia, and its military was an expensive beast to maintain. The legions were essential to defend borders, suppress rebellions, and expand territories. However, as the empire expanded, so did the costs associated with its military. The Roman military campaigns, particularly during the reign of Emperor Trajan around 98 to 117 AD, stretched the resources of the empire. The Dacian Wars, for example, drained considerable wealth from the state, leading to increased taxation and resource extraction from provinces. The financial burden was crushing. Soldiers needed pay, equipment needed constant replacement, and moving armies across thousands of miles? That alone drained the treasury dry. What's crucial here is how this military spending impacted the economy. As resources were funneled into military operations, vital public services began to suffer. Infrastructure deteriorated, agricultural production fell, and trade routes became less secure due to constant military engagements. By the 3rd century, the empire was facing a crisis. The economic strain, compounded by external pressures from invading tribes, led to a series of civil wars. The situation worsened in the late 4th century. The cost of maintaining the military doubled as the empire faced threats on multiple fronts. The Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns were not just enemies. They were symptoms of a faltering empire, a sign that resources were stretched too thin. The Roman generals were often forced to rely on mercenaries, who were expensive and less loyal. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire officially fell. What can we learn from Rome? The fall of the Roman Empire illuminates the dangers of excessive military expenditure. The Roman experience shows us that a great military cannot be sustained without economic health. The lesson is clear. When the quest for power overshadows economic reality, decline becomes inevitable. Now, let's examine the Ottoman Empire, which reached its peak during the 16th century under Suleiman the Magnificent. The Ottoman military was a formidable force, known for its advanced technology and efficient organization. However, as the empire expanded into Europe and Asia, military spending surged. In the late 17th century, military expenditures consumed as much as 25% of the GDP. This sustained focus on military might had far-reaching consequences. The Ottomans engaged in a series of protracted wars, such as the Great Turkish War, 1683-1699, which drained the treasury and strained the economy. The empire's reliance on military power began to overshadow the need for internal reform and economic development. The costs of warfare, coupled with the demands of maintaining a vast empire, led to significant financial instability. As military spending escalated, the Ottomans failed to adapt to economic changes occurring in Europe. The Industrial Revolution was reshaping economies, but the Ottoman Empire lagged behind. By the 19th century, the economic strain was evident. The empire faced massive debts, and by 1876 it declared bankruptcy. The military, once the pride of the empire, became a liability. What's alarming is that the pattern continues. The Ottoman experience provides a contemporary lens through which we can view modern nations. Countries today are still grappling with the consequences of military expenditure. The lessons from the Ottomans underscore the importance of balancing military spending with economic growth. What can history teach us today? The Ottoman Empire's decline reveals the inherent risks of prioritizing military might over sustainable economic practices. The empire's downfall serves as a warning for contemporary nations. Without a balanced approach, the consequences can be dire. As we consider these historical examples, Spain, Rome, and the Ottomans, we start to see a troubling pattern emerge. Excessive military spending is a common thread in the decline of great powers. But what about the more recent experiences of the Soviet Union and Britain? The Soviet Union, at the height of the Cold War in the 1980s, allocated about 15–20% of its GDP to military expenditures. This was a direct response to the threat perceived from NATO and the United States. However, as the economy struggled to keep pace, the military burden became increasingly unsustainable. The financial strain led to widespread shortages and economic stagnation. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed under the weight of its military commitments. Similarly, Britain faced its own military spending crisis after World War II. At one point, military expenditures soared to 50% of GDP, driven by the need to maintain a global presence. The financial strain resulted in severe economic difficulties. The country struggled to recover from the war, leading to decolonization and a shift away from its imperial ambitions. This brings us to the present day. As modern nations grapple with military expenditures, the lessons of history resonate. The need to balance military spending with economic health is paramount. Countries across the globe must consider the consequences of their military budgets. What can history teach us today? If the past has shown us anything, it is that overspending on military endeavors can lead to collapse. The examination of Spain, Rome, the Ottomans, the Soviet Union, and Britain reveals a consistent pattern. Excessive military spending has been a harbinger of decline for every superpower. Each empire faced its unique challenges, yet the underlying metric remained the same. As military expenditures soared, economic stability faltered, leading ultimately to collapse. Today, as nations face threats from every direction, history has one clear lesson: you can't spend your way to permanent security. The balance between military might and economic stability is crucial. Every collapse has a story. Let's investigate the narratives woven through the fabric of history, hoping to learn and apply them to our current global landscape. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of military spending and its impact on the rise and fall of superpowers throughout history. If you found this analysis insightful, consider subscribing to Empire Unraveled for more in-depth examinations of historical patterns and their relevance today. Let's continue to uncover the stories behind the collapse of empires and the lessons they hold for us now.